Hello, everybody. Welcome to a British Audiophile. I'm here again with Ian from Ecoustics. Welcome, Ian.
Hey, Taryn, how are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. You?
Like everybody else, observing the world around us with abject horror.
Yes.
But I mean, aside from obviously what's going on right now in Ukraine, COVID is pretty much over here, at least in the eastern United States. So life seems to have returned to normal.
Yeah, similar here, actually.
Getting into our amplifier choices, I want to go first on one of them. I've had the opportunity in the last 12 months to review actually 3 Rotel amplifiers.
Right.
The A12, the A14, and the Rotel Michi X3, which is like my choice for today. The Michi X3 was one of these really, really surprising amplifiers that I sort of didn't know what to expect with it. And the amplifier has a very minimalist kind of design to it. Like there's really nothing very flashy about it. But when you actually kind of get it past a certain volume point, and I was using the Magnapan LRS, which is only a $650 speaker with, this almost, $5,000 integrated amplifier. The way that the Rotel just sort of made the Maggies sort of wake up was actually like a little scary. It went from being a really good speaker that I enjoy listening to daily to a speaker that took on a totally different personality. And the Rotel's sort of both warm and also forward sounding at the same time. It's got it's got a personality to it, and it is just so well put together. Taking the top cover off, and I looked inside, I was like, okay, I can sort of understand why maybe this amplifier is $5,000, because the parts quality is superb. The transformer is like the size of a pizza. And it's just everything about it is just well built. It's one of these things, like when you lift it up, you're like, okay, I'm going to have a hernia in about 30 seconds. But it's a superb piece of kit. It just, everything about it, Rotel thought everything through. And the only thing it really doesn't do, it's not really, obviously it doesn't really have like a streaming part of it in a way, so you have to add a streamer to it. But overall, I can think of very few amplifiers below $5,000 that I think compete with the X3.
Well, I knew your choices, so I checked the specs. So here it's £4,299 in the UK. Don't know how that equates into.
That's more than it is in America.
Okay, right. So 4.3, say 200 watt per channel into 8 ohms. Bit of a beast. 29 kgs it weighs. It's Class AB, and like you say, it's got a built-in moving magnet phono stage and an AKM based DAC.
I tried it with Q acoustic speakers. I tried it with the new PSB Synchrony speakers, Paul Barton's new flagship, the Maggies. I tried it with the Polk Audio Legend series. And the thing with all of them, it was just effortless. Like it barely broke a sweat with any of the music that I listened to. And I'll play heavy metal, techno, electronic music through these speakers at very loud volumes when no one is around. And this thing barely broke a sweat. I felt like I could, if I had gone any further, I would have started damaging my ears. It's really that powerful.
So much headroom. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, shall I move on to my choice?
Absolutely.
So my first choice is the Trilogy 925 integrated amplifier. That's from a small British manufacturer. Now, I should actually state for viewers that we're sticking to integrated amplifiers rather than pre-powers deliberately. So I haven't reviewed any amplifiers at this price point, but I've heard this a few times and I've always been very impressed. In fact, the last time I heard it was with the ProAct flagship K10 speakers. They're best part of 30 grand. Again, I took a look at the specs for those of you who are interested. It retails here for £13,250, so it isn't cheap. And it's going to be.
Am I allowed to say ouch?
Yeah, that doesn't meet your criteria.
Wow.
135 watts per channel into 8 ohms. It weighs 25.5 kilograms. The inputs, what I like about it, there's an interesting design. So the input stage has 6H6 pi super tubes, they call them. I think they're super tubes because they run at low voltage. I think they're Russian twin diodes or something, or might be operating, but they're operating in they're triodes, I think. But anyway, one of the two. So it's a big difference between a diode and a triode, but
Yeah.
it's on the input stage. It's fully balanced as far as the input is concerned. I couldn't confirm whether it's fully balanced as far as the output stage. So it's got a fully balanced input stage at least. Zero negative feedback design, which I like. I
Yeah.
think if you're looking at amplifiers at that end, then that negative feedback is known to kill soundstage. So that's what I perceive is the benefit from that. The output stage is a combination between MOSFET and bipolars. So it's an interesting design, but from a sonic perspective, it was driving these 30 grand Proax extremely well. And it's just the grip, the control, but the warmth. You get a lot of things that sound very clean, but a lot of modern stuff these days sounds quite lean,
Yeah.
I think they're chasing low distortion specs, and sometimes I can't help but feel like sometimes that you throw the baby out with the bathwater sometimes when you're doing that. So what's your second pick?
Oh, the Cambridge Audio Edge A. I've actually owned this for a long time. It was not a popular purchase at $6,000 US. It's a beautifully clean looking amplifier. I love having the solitary dial on the front of the faceplate. Once again, it does not have a built-in streamer, which for $6,000 you would expect. Has a fantastic DAC. I'm actually currently running the Hollow Audio Spring, which is a very popular DAC here in the US. Yeah, the Spring 3. And it's just, that's a better DAC than what's in the Cambridge.
Yeah,
but it's another amplifier that you would never think to use with a pair of $650 Maggie LRS.
Yeah.
But when you get to a certain point on the Edge A, around 11 o'clock on the volume dial with the Cambridge, and the bass in the room from those speakers, which is not exactly a strong point of any of those speakers, especially not the LRS. But when you're listening to electronic music, or you're listening to Led Zeppelin or Rush or The Who, and you want to hear a bit more of the impact from Keith's drum kit, or Neil Peart's pounding, or or Geddy Lee's bass playing, and you crank it a little bit on the Edge A, and you can almost physically feel the energy in the mid bass and below. I'm kind of just sitting there, just like smiling like an idiot, which is most of the time. But it's just one of those things that you realize, like, just how good of an amplifier the Edge A is, and that maybe spending a penny more is kind of like, at this point, like a futile thing. I mean, it just, I don't think I could better it. It's also, it's a solid state amplifier. But I don't buy into this idea that every solid state amplifier has that certain kind of, very neutral, lean, sort of clinical sounding presentation. I actually find the Edge A to be a little bit more on the warmer side, and I can definitely hear it with the Maggies. And when I used it with the PSB Synchrony B600, which is like the bookshelf version of Paul Barton's flagship, that bookshelf has tremendous bass. If you're looking for a reference quality monitor, a two-way that has really, really, really impressive bass, the PSB Synchrony is a fantastic speaker for only like $2,500 US. And the Cambridge on that speaker sounded like a large floor standing speaker in my space. It had too much bass.
Here in the UK, that's £5,499, £5.5 grand. It's 100 watts per channel into 8 ohms, so half the power of the Rotel Michi, but it's running quite a bit of Class A bias.
Yes,
it's noted to be a high Class A. So again, for those of you viewers who are interested in a bit of a technical analysis, it's another beast at around 25 kgs, similar to the Michi. It's DC coupled, so there's no capacitors in the signal path. And that's an attempt to obviously get the capacitors out there to reduce distortion. The quite interesting thing they've done with the power supply transformers are they've run 2 of them in reverse kind of symmetry. And that's supposed to make sure that you get even less radiated noise to try and reduce the radiated noise from the transformers.
I would say it's actually one of the quietest amplifiers I've ever tried. It's just so well built. Like, it's one of those products that you plug everything in, you turn it on, you let it warm up for 4 or 5 minutes, and it just does what they promise you it's going to do. And I think, when you're spending the type of money that we're talking about, you want a product that's reliable, it's well engineered, it's built like a tank, and when you listen to it, you kind of get that stupid giggle, like, because you're like, wow, like I didn't even know my speakers could even do that.
Yeah.
And that's why for me it's something that I don't foresee getting rid of, like, period. Like, I think I can see owning this amplifier until I'm done.
So my second pick is the musical Fidelity Nu-Vista. They do the 600 and the 800. I think the 600's ample for most people. It comes in at, well, almost £4,500. 200 watt per channel into 8 ohms. It's 31 kgs, so it's the heaviest out of the bunch so far.
It's beefy.
And you know me, I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to some of these technicalities, so I always like to delve into all of this. So it runs Nu-Vista tubes, which are basically, for viewers' benefits. Those are glassless tubes made out of metal and ceramic. They were kind of invented in the late 50s, early 1960s. Solid state took form. They were designed to basically have lower distortion, more power efficient, I should say, than conventional gas tubes. But because solid state took off, they didn't really get the traction that they perhaps could have had if they came in at a different time. So I've heard a few demos of this. So it's basically, I would imagine those Nu-Vistas are used on the input stage, and it's all with 200 watts. It's going to be solid state. Well, it is some solid state stuff going on in the output stage. So it's another hybrid design, a bit like the Trilogy, but interesting using those Nu-Vista tubes.
Didn't Project buy Musical Fidelity?
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Heinz, I can't pronounce his surname. Heinz was a distributor for Musical Fidelity for a number of years in certain European countries.
Right. So there's your answer.
So, and he was he's always loved their products. So I think when Anthony wanted to sell up, he was interested in obviously stepping in. But hopefully it's in safe hands. It'll be interesting to see where they go with that brand. But Musical Fidelity have produced some of my favorite amplifiers over the years.
Yeah, they've always been very popular with the reviewing crowd over here.
Yeah. It's just, so I've heard that amplifier, either the 600 or the 800, and on a few occasions, and they've always been impressive. The one that sticks in my mind was when they were with the big Kef reference speakers. So not the blades, but I can't remember what the reference series goes. I think it goes 1, 3, and 7 or something. But the big ones, again, you can't say until you get them home. But I've always been kind of like, I'm not sure about those Kef speakers, but they were absolutely. They were absolutely singing, because
Kef USA is like 20 minutes from my house. I'm not jumping into this conversation.
Don't say anything then. But this range of amplifiers has always been impressive, and it was very nicely balanced with those big Kef reference speakers. It had, again, the word musicality means so many different things to different people. It had warmth, it had grace, it had power, dynamics, and it was a very impressive demo. So wouldn't mind taking a look at those at some point.
I'm sure.
What's your third pick?
Oh, okay. So the Brits are going to like me on this one. The Cyrus i9 XR is so ridiculously good. Cyrus gear is sort of hit and miss with people in terms of its industrial design, because it really looks like an elongated shoebox, with very small heat sinks, running down the length of the amplifier. Cyrus has a certain look, and people either love it or hate it. I know people who look at it and go, it doesn't. But they've made, I guess, this range a little more modern looking, and they've changed around like the buttons and the screen. And I have to tell you, first of all, the phono stage inside this integrated amplifier is holy God good. And I have some very good phono stages at home, and the Cyrus is just so confident. And it doesn't matter if you're using like a $99 Ortofon 2M Red. I've been running actually a high output Grado Labs Opus 3 from the Timber series into it. It's like a 4 millivolt moving iron cartridge. And the Cyrus is very solid state, in its sort of tonal balance and presentation. But you put a decent warm cartridge with a high output into this phono stage, And I'm telling you, I have not heard too many phono stages, separate phono stages, below a couple $1,000 that I think are as good as the phono stage that's inside this integrated amplifier. The Cyrus gear definitely has a bit of a leanness to it, but put together with a system with a pair of Wharfdales or Q Acoustics, PSB, like Spender Classic series in that amplifier, like, good Lord.
How much is the amplifier?
I want to say it's in like the almost $6,000 to $7,000 range in the US. Cyrus's prices have changed in the last 12 months because of obviously supply chain issues and and currency and the value of the pound against the US dollar. But it's first of all, it's so well built. I mean, British audiophiles probably roll their eyes and go duh. Like, American audiophiles have ignored Cyrus audio for the longest time. And the more I listen to the Cyrus gear, sort of connected to my Q Acoustics speakers, and also I have some other monitors that I'm not going to mention yet because they're under review and I don't want to give anything away. But Cyrus is really good. It's kind of like shame on North American audio reviewers for not covering Cyrus audio for the last 20 years, because it's as good as any of the high-end solid state gear under $10,000 that I have listened to at home, period. See, what's interesting about all these products, I mean, granted, the Trilogy is a little, I guess, out of that range, but the amplifier that I would have easily have slotted into this mix had I not had the Cyrus here for the last few weeks. The Rega Aethos is phenomenally good integrated amplifier. I mean, if you were to ask me, like, what are 3 or 4 of the amplifiers in that price range that I would recommend to people who could spend that kind of money, that Rega integrated amplifier makes my list so quickly. Such a kind of fly under the radar, not flashy, doesn't have a lot of bells and whistles, but if you put it with a decent pair of loudspeakers, something that's up to that level, the Rega, the Aethos is absolutely one of their best products ever. I think the Aethos is like where they really, really kind of hit their mark in terms of the quality of what they're producing.
I've heard it I've heard it at a show where it was being used by a number of manufacturers to demo their gear. That's the only time I really heard that. And it, either Rega were doing a massive push at that show, or a number of speaker manufacturers turned around and thought, actually, that's a nice amp. We wouldn't mind using that to showcase our product. So
it's a good
my exposure to that one. So shall I pick my third one?
Yes, go for it.
Third and final.
Yes.
So that is the Sugden Anniversary 50, which retails here for £4,565 now. So again, I'll give you a little bit of a technical rundown for those people who are interested. It's 50 watts per channel into 8 ohms, but it's pure Class A, as you'd expect from Sugden. It's, again, DC coupled, so there's no capacitors in the signal path, again, in an attempt to lower distortion. The output stage has a comparator correction circuit. Now, when I heard about that, I thought, that's something that I'd like to investigate a little bit further to see how that works. I mean, it's similar to perhaps what Hagel have with their feed-forward system, but it could be something entirely different. But what they're trying to do is compensate for actually the output impedance. So the output impedance of the amplifier is driven down to close to 0, and that gives it a very high damping factor. So
Sugden gear is just lovely to listen to. There's something about it.
So the other thing that I think I noted when I was looking at what interested me about the design is that it uses, you'd think Sugden 50-watt Class A amplifier, you're going to need 2 people to lift it. No, it's actually quite lightweight. It uses a switch mode power supply, which now it's probably a whole bunch of audiophiles that was turned off now. But it's
those are the feet running for the exit.
Yes, exit stage door left, whichever way left is, depending on how they've spun this camera around. But it's running at 1 megahertz, according to Sugden, and Lin also believe this with their switch mode power supplies. They think that they've developed it to such an extent that they've got around the problems that come with switch mode power supply in terms of the radiated noise. it means that you've got an amplifier that's relatively light, doesn't produce a lot of heat, so you don't have to spend a huge amount of money on massive heat sinks and transformers. And they think that the transient response that they get from this amplifier is better than their linear power supply. And they do linear power supply, so they haven't really, it's not like that they're fully into switch mode power supply.
Right.
It's a very interesting design. I've heard it on 2 or 3 occasions. It's always sounded good. The one time that stuck in my mind was when it was running ATC SCM40s. That's their 3-way in their kind of junior range before you jump into the big boys, the 50s, the 100s, the 150s, etc. Now, ATCs, I know, are a pig to drive. ATC specify, I think, on their specs that they need a minimum of 75 watts. And my discussions from them is because they have, most drive units have a light moving mass. ATC drivers have a fairly significant moving mass.
Yeah.
And so you need a bit of power to wake them up and get them going. But this baby was singing. This anniversary, 50 watts of Class A power driving these ATCs, which is a 3-way speaker. I have an ear for that tonality that I look for. I want the clarity. I want the sound staging, but I want the grip and control. But I also want that richness of tone and warmth. And it was delivering. And so that's another one.
I've heard the Sugden with Harbeth and Proac. Right. And I was just kind of like, wow, this is really, really good stuff. It's sort of like, it's not flashy. I mean, if you're looking for flashy hi-fi gear, Sugden is not for you. But there's just something about it that instruments just have that kind of tonality that you're like I actually, maybe one of the best amplifiers I've ever heard for jazz and like chamber and sort of, smaller scale, acoustic music, pop, folk, just like with the right speakers in a small room, like you could sort of like die and go to heaven listening to a Sugden amplifier, with that kind of stuff. I've always just liked Sugden. It's sort of, I mean, I don't know enough about it in terms of reliability, and operationally in terms of how they fare long term. But everyone I know
I think they've been going for 50 years, and
a
very, very, very high percentage of them are still in circulation.
Service. Okay, so there's your proof. But I mean, I don't know anybody who's ever purchased a Sugden amplifier who has turned around and flipped it on eBay like a month later. I think it's because they like that specific sound. I also know, just based on the other products that the distributor brings in, DeVore Fidelity, I know, is a speaker that a lot of people like with Sugden. Yeah, no, Sugden makes great stuff. It's just
you're right. Proac and Sugden have always been a very good match historically.
Yeah.
But this was with ATCs that I heard them, and I was surprised that this 50 watt per channel Class A amplifier was driving them so well.
That is the fascinating thing about this hobby, is that you can look at specs on paper, but until you actually put the two components together in a system and listen to them, you don't know. Yeah, I think all 6 amplifiers we mentioned are all really, really, really top products.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Ian. I think we'll leave it there for today, and then we'll pick it up for the next one. I think what we'll probably try and do, since we've done amplifiers, maybe do the same thing with speakers in the future.
Oh, that's gonna be fun. That's gonna be a lot of fun.
That will be fun. Okay.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you, viewers, for watching. See you next time.